Today we're going to be talking about Lieutenant Dan. Not the Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, but the Lieutenant Dan that is famous for surviving 2 hurricanes down in Florida. Don't go anywhere because this story is full of twists and turns. I mean, this guy was canceled, he was uncanceled, then he was recanceled. It's a whole crazy thing. Let's get into it. If I were to say to you the name Lieutenant Dan, I'm sure most of you guys would probably think of the beloved character from the movie Forrest Gump, the guy who lost his legs in war.
See that? Do you know what it's like not to be able to use your legs?
Well, yes, sir, I do.
Ice cream aficionado.
Lieutenant Dan, I got you some ice cream. Lieutenant Dan, ice cream.
And all around just a kind of guy who has his string of good luck and bad luck.
Well, that's just perfect.
Now again, this video is not about Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, although I gotta admit I'm having fun putting these clips in here, so let me just put one more for good measure.
Yeah, well, I just got one thing to say to that. God damn bless America. Hey! Well, ow! Lieutenant Dan!
Alright, I swear I'm done with the Lieutenant Dan clips, at least for now. Although I may sprinkle them in here and there just because, you know what, there's so many damn good quotes and stuff from that movie involving the character, it's hard to resist putting them in here. However, again, we're talking about a guy who goes by Lieutenant Dan. Well, he's been labeled Lieutenant Dan because, well, he's a guy who lives on a boat and he's missing one of his legs. The Lieutenant Dan that we are talking about is known as Joseph Malinowski. He's a Florida man who became famous on the internet, mainly on TikTok, for deciding not to abandon his boats during the past 2 hurricanes that have hit Florida. The story of Lieutenant Dan, aka Joseph Malinowski, took the internet by storm. The internet could not get enough of this guy.
Dan, you weren't afraid at all last night?
No, I'm not scared of anything. What I've been through, this weather is nothing, and I put my faith in God.
So when Hurricane Milton came and went and Lieutenant Dan was still standing tall, the whole internet was pretty relieved for one thing. People were captivated by just kind of the mellow approach that Dan had to this whole thing.
It was pretty mellow. The wind picked up for a little bit and bounced me around. At one point last night, I was getting bashed up against this wall, so I went out and I cut my anchor line to get away from it. So I have a $250 anchor sitting down there that I got to go in and get.
Dan, you weren't afraid at all last night?
No, I'm not scared of anything. What I've been through, this weather is nothing, and I put my faith in God. God told me to come here. God told me 5 years ago, I was in Colorado, he put on my heart, Tampa, Florida, and get a boat. I woke up one morning with that on my heart, and that's all I could think about. And I left Colorado, I went to North Carolina, left North Carolina, came to Florida. I've been in Florida for 5 years, stuck on the East Coast, never came over. In March, I came over, I found this boat for $1,200. I bought it, I come to Tampa, and guess what? Tampa floods. Not today, not yesterday, but during the last one, Helena. Helena was way worse than what this one was.
First off, let me just say getting that boat for $1,200 was an absolute steal, and that was just one of the W's for Dan. Another W for Dan was just kind of like a lot of the approach that he had towards the storms. He had some interesting ideas on how the storm worked and why being in a boat was the safest place to be during a hurricane. Now, I think there's some flaws in his logic, but I'll let Dan explain.
I'm not going anywhere because the safest place to be is on a boat in a flood. Okay, we learned that with Noah. Everybody that stayed on land drowned. Noah and the animals lived.
Now, I'm sure there's plenty of lessons that could be learned from the story of Noah's Ark. I mean, after all, Noah did save one of each animal. However, I do think there's some flaws in Lieutenant Dan's thinking here because the boat could have easily capsized from the wind, in which case Lieutenant Dan would be absolutely screwed. Luckily, that didn't happen though, and Dan rode out the storm just fine.
Lieutenant Dan! Are you okay? Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Are you sure? I think you made it through the worst of it. Yeah. The water's all receded here. I don't know. It might go high.
Right now I'm doing fine. I'm stuck here. I can't go.
Okay. Well, we're we're gonna stay up here, so. All right. Okay.
So the real-life Lieutenant Dan's journey would get the attention from people like Aiden Ross, who is one of the leaders of Kick, who offered Malinowski a fat check to keep streaming on Kick. He said Malinowski could stream his sailing around the world, which I don't even know if Malinowski actually sails that sailboat. I think he just kind of lives on it. But hey, you know what? Next thing you know, we'll watch a stream of a guy being lost at sea, which, you know, I mean, that's great content if you ask me. So you'd think things were looking up for old Lieutenant Dan, but it turns out Lieutenant Dan has a bit of a history. And if there's one thing we know about the internet, it's that if you have a history, it's going to be resurfaced at some point, especially if you go viral. And even though Aiden Ross offered him a huge Kick deal and to buy him a fancy ass boat that he could use to sail around the world and stream on it, it doesn't look like Lieutenant Dan's going to be able to sail anywhere because unfortunately he was arrested. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrest records show Malinowski, 54, was arrested Friday for trespassing and failure to appear in court on previous charges of operating an unregistered vehicle and having no valid driver's license. My guess is that that unregistered vehicle is the boat that he so famously survived both hurricanes in. Isn't that ironic when you really think about it? The thing that made you famous is also the thing that got you arrested. Police said they initially met on Thursday with Malinowski, who said he couldn't properly dispose of the human waste on his boat, creating a public health hazard.
Well, that's just perfect.
Yes, that is a dirty, smelly mess, apparently. Apparently, police repeatedly warned him to move his boat from the dock, but when they returned Friday morning, it was still there. Malinowski is now at the Orient Road Jail, and his boat, which was unregistered, has been impounded. His arrest record, which identifies his occupation as TikTok star, indicates he has 2 outstanding warrants for failing to appear in court. Apparently, Joseph Malinowski is no stranger to the criminal justice system, as Joseph Malinowski has been arrested several times for various different offenses. In April 2022, he was arrested for punching a police officer at a bar in Florida. Also in February 2023, he faced charges for aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. This incident involved pouring gasoline on a bench and attempting to ignite it near a woman. Malinowski also apparently splashed a woman with gasoline, however, she did not ignite when he tried to light the bench. Additional charges for Malinowski include battery against a police officer, drug possession, and attempted breaking and entering. Yeah, not exactly the Lieutenant Dan we know and love from the movies, but still that same old angry attitude. So like I said, this story does have a lot of twists and turns. It would turn out some people would find Joseph Malinowski, aka Lieutenant Dan, and tell him that due to his criminal record, Aiden Ross was now withdrawing his Kick deal and there was no boat in his future, even though his previous boat was impounded, so there's technically no boat involved at all in this story at the moment. Not to mention that Lieutenant Dan doesn't even have a boating license, so he was never really supposed to be in that boat to begin with, let alone stay in it during 2 hurricanes. So I'm not exactly sure what the legality is behind Aiden Ross buying him a boat and whether or not he would even be able to operate it if he did get a free boat. Aiden Ross would go on the corrector record saying that Joseph Malinowski's Kick deal was still a valid deal and to let Aiden Ross know when Joseph Malinowski found a boat that he liked. Aiden Ross added that he would be willing to spend $60,000 to $100,000 on a boat for Joseph Malinowski. However, I don't know if he's going to be able to sail that because he might be on probation after all this. Again, this story of Lieutenant Dan's completely crazy. A lot of people on X added in their own allegations towards the guy. I think some involved him attacking someone with a violin, but as far as I know, most of those are unfounded. But the stuff that we went through today, at least I looked up and was able to confirm. It just goes to show you, though, you never want to trust what you read on the internet. Internet celebrities who become famous overnight are usually not always the best people, especially if they're living in a boat that they got for $1,200. I mean, hell, it just goes to show you that anybody can make it on the internet these days. All you got to do is put your life in danger by staying places where you're supposed to be evacuating from and then filming the whole entire thing. I'm not here to judge who we watch on the internet. At the end of the day, most people can't turn away from a train wreck, and I get it. I was just as interested in this story as all of you were. And if there's one thing the internet continues to teach us, is that the crazier someone is, the more likely they are to become filthy rich on the internet. Or maybe you'll just get a good Kick deal. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.